Dr. Sharp, Mr. Wiles, please report to the office. Now!
Welcome to another edition of From the Principal's Desk with Mr. Dennis Wiles and Dr. Chris Sharp. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of our podcast and YouTube channel called From the Principal's Desk. It's part of our blog series that we've been doing. We thought we'd put some audio and video behind it. Want to introduce my colleague, Dennis Wiles. Dennis, how's it going today?
I'm good, Sharp. How are you today, buddy?
Buddy, if I was any better, I'd have to be twins just to handle it. You know how it is.
All right.
Today, we want to kind of introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about our history, and get started into some of the culture issues that we've been discussing in our blog. If you haven't been checking out our blog, we both have one. Please check it out. We'll put a link underneath in the show descriptions. So, Dennis, tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me some of your educational history, where you've been, what you're doing now.
Sure. I started teaching in 2004. I've worked in several different school systems. I've taught anywhere from 5th grade through 8th grade, all subject areas. I've been an administrator for 6 years. I've served as a head administrator or the lead principal for 4 years and assistant principal for 2 years.
Okay.
So I'm in my 6th year, finishing up my 7th year now. You know, we're almost locking another year down here. So finishing up another year in administration, and I love it.
Hey, I'll tell you, and I'll give you a big amen on another year locking it and getting that locked down, because it's, you know as well as I do, and for any administrator out there, you know that this is probably one of the busiest times of year. We're probably a little crazy for starting this right now, but we're here to support you.
Yeah, but you know what, man? I've been looking forward to it.
I have too, man. We've been talking about this for a couple months, and we're actually getting something on video. We're getting a little bit going. I know we've got several weeks into our blogs. A little bit about myself. I've been teaching for about 14, 15 years. I was mainly an elementary, middle school person. I spent most of my time in the middle schools. I've taught art. I've taught social studies. I've taught ELA, reading, speech. I've been moved all over the place. Fortunately, I was able to come to Greene County as a administrator of a K-8 school. It's a rural school, much like yours. And I had no assistant principal experience coming in. I was straight out of school. Go Bucks, ETSU, woo! But it was really a steep learning curve for me. I don't know about you. You've had a similar experience, but that was major undertaking.
Yeah, I actually did the same thing you did. I followed the same path. I come straight out of the classroom into a lead principal position of a K-8 elementary school without any assistant principal experience, and then I left that position to become an assistant principal, but it was closer to home.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, and I did that for 2 years, and you know, I learned a lot, but in the end, I missed the place where I got my start. It was just such a good system. You know, they give me an opportunity, and it was an honor to come back. And I've been the principal for 3 years now at a elementary school here in Greene County Schools, and I love it.
Well, you've had two in this system also.
Yes.
You've been at one on the north side. Now you're on the south side.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different culture. A lot of people don't realize in rural systems, depending on where you're at, there is a big cultural shift, and that leads us into kind of what we're talking about today. Let's talk about culture, Dennis, because you are, I would consider, a cultural guru.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Well, I will.
I'm a culture enthusiast.
There you go. If I can't
like
be an
to
athlete,
soak it up.
Yeah. If you can't be an athlete, be an athletic supporter, right?
That's right, man. I soak it up. I like to read about it. I like to listen about it. You know, I follow all kinds of leaders and, you know, people that are big on, you know, culture and organizational culture on Twitter and social media. So I'm always trying to soak that stuff up.
Well, and for both of us, full disclosure, if you've done a little bit of reading or know anything about us, both of us are going through cultural shifts in our school, and I think this is a great time for you and I to sit down and let's define what we're looking for. How do we shift that culture? Because you've made some cultural shifts over the last 2 years.
Yeah,
some big ones. Because full disclosure, your school was having some cultural problems when you showed up. And I don't want to get into the background behind it, but you've done some great things. So tell me, how do you define your school culture?
Well, first off, culture, you know, to me, culture trumps everything. You know, if your culture is not strong, nothing else is going to be as strong as it should be. So I'm a big, firm believer in culture trumps everything. You
I like
know,
that.
and that's why I titled my blog series that. I'm doing like a 10-part blog series, and we're 8 weeks into it now. But, you know, it's just breaking down culture, you know, and the reasons, importance of having a strong culture in a school. You know, and for me, that's my top priority every year, and that's something I have to keep tabs on is my school culture, because I feel like if it's not strong and where it should be, then nothing else in my school is going to be. I think everything, you know, feeds off of that.
Sure.
As far as the definition of culture, you know, to simplify it when talking to faculty and staff, I've always told my faculty that our culture is just, it's how we do what we do. But, you know, like I said, you know, being a culture enthusiast and following people and learning from people, I've kind of shifted that here recently, and even talked to my staff about it today. You know, I said, now I express, you know, our school culture is made up of 3 things. You know, school culture is the beliefs that drive the behaviors that create the experiences.
Wow, that's powerful. I like that. I'm
Yeah.
going to steal it. I'm just stealing it.
Hey, there's no stealing in education. It's all 3, right?
collaboration,
That's
right.
right. It's collaboration. It's not
That's right.
stealing. You know, I got it from somebody. But, you know, think about that. You know, your beliefs drive the behaviors in your school. So what you believe and what you push out in your school drives the behaviors of the people in your school. And those behaviors create experiences. They're going to be positive or negative. You know, and so your beliefs, you know, if there's a breakdown there, if you look at those 3 parts, if you've got a strong culture, then you have a strong belief system. You've got good positive behaviors going on in your class and in your school, and that creates positive experiences.
Well, and here's the thing I think is so interesting, because, you know, considering what you came into,
Sure.
a lot of times culture, that's hard to address. It's hard to get your thumb on, because you've got buses coming up, you've got discipline referrals, you've got teachers that are moving, or, you know, one that's going out on a medical leave. And a lot of times the thing that we should really be focusing on, that is the, you know, kind of the crux of our school, gets kind of pushed to the side. We assume culture is good.
Yeah.
And that's a man,
It's easy to do.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times you think it's good. You think things are okay just because they're smooth. But there's a lot of things going on in the background that you may not be aware of. And sometimes your culture may not be, you know, as strong as you think it is.
Well, yeah, teachers will, trust me, if there's a problem, a lot of times they want to keep that under wraps before you know about it. They're,
Sure.
you know, the grumbling will be around the copy machine. The
Right,
grumbling will
right.
be in the teacher's lounge. They're not going to come to you and say, hey, I don't like this, this, and this. There are a few, but most of them don't. So, okay, you stepped into that position. Tell me about how did you assess that culture? How did you take the temperature?
Yeah, that's what I did. You know, when you're talking about assessing culture and keeping, getting a good idea if you're, you know, how your culture's doing, is as strong as it should be, are we moving in the right direction? You know, you've got to assess the culture in your school building, and I call that doing a temperature check. You know, it's, when a kid comes in and they're sick, you check their temperature. So if you want to know how your school's doing as far as, you know, culture goes, I do a temperature check. You know, and that's simple, man. You just talk to people. You gotta, if you want to know, ask. You know, get people from different parts of the building. You know, get a good trusted primary teacher. You know, somebody from the lower elementary grades, somebody from the middle grades, somebody from special areas. You know, a parent. You know, get different people that you know is going to give you good, honest feedback, and ask them. Say, how are things going? You know, what's working here? What's not working here? If you could change something, what would you change? You know, or you know, what do you love about working here? You know, what are some suggestions, some ideas? You know, if you want to know, ask. They'll tell you.
Well, and see, I made the mistake when I first got there. I was in a similar situation. The culture of the building I'm in now was damaged. I think that's fair to say. And it became almost a safety thing for me not to ask, because I couldn't handle the amount of things that were going wrong in my school culture. And I had to build relationships with those people to get that honest feedback that you're talking about. A lot of times, people will tell you what you want to hear in administration. They'll, you know,
Oh, yeah.
especially that, you know, I hate to call it the A student, but you know the one, you know, the gold star student who knows how to play school. They're in your building. They're teaching somewhere. I promise you. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. I kind of went to the ones that didn't like me as much as I got more comfortable.
It's the ones you knew would be honest with you.
Absolutely. Tell you a little bit, when I got there, there was a teacher in my building who had applied for the principalship. She didn't get the job. Great teacher. Don't get me wrong. I love this teacher. She is an excellent teacher and probably would be a great administrator. But there was some animosity there that I didn't understand. But if I ask her a question, you better believe she told me exactly what she thought. And initially, it was off-putting because I'm hearing all the complaints. But boy, now I look back, it's like she was being brutally honest in a time where I needed it the most.
Yeah, that honesty helped you more than anything at the time. It might have been tough to swallow and tough to hear, but it gave you more valuable feedback than anybody else probably did at that time.
Well, I'll tell you this. It's like my staff likes to tell me every once in a while, that's why you get paid the big bucks, right? Because everybody gets rich in education.
I hear that all the time. Every time something goes wrong, that's why you get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, I'm not going to retire anytime soon. So moving forward, what was your next steps? So you've taken the temperature. You've kind of got an assessment of, people are telling you things. Tell me, where were your next moves?
Yeah, let's talk about this for a minute. As school leaders, I want to go back to what you said. As school leaders, it's our duty to constantly check the temperature of our schools. I mean, that's our responsibility to keep up with that and do that. How do you do that? The first step is to get out of the office. So many administrators they hole up in their office. You hear those stories about administrators that, kids, talk about never seeing them unless there's a problem. Get out of the office, man. Abraham Lincoln, one of my all-time favorite leaders, he once said leaders can't live in an ivory tower. He was known for visiting soldiers on the front lines during the Civil War. They'd tell him to get back. You're too close to danger. Get back. Even got his hat shot off one time, or so the legend goes. But he wasn't afraid to get out and get in the trenches with his people because that's how he learned what the problems were. That's how he learned, how to provide the support that needed to be there. As school leaders, we can't sit in our office all day and expect to know what's going on. So you got to get out and do those temperature checks. Like I said, if you want to know, ask. Get different perspectives. Talk to your faculty, talk to your staff, ask questions, and listen. Talk to students, talk to parents. Get that feedback. And then once you get all that valuable feedback, once you get all that and you've collected it, take a look at your notes and look at your commonalities. Hey, what's being said by multiple teachers? What's being said by multiple parents? What are some things these students are pointing out? That should give you an idea to help you prioritize your list and show you areas of deficiency that you need to focus on.
Well, you're doing qualitative research right here. I mean, you're doing university level, qualitative research, getting those essentially surveys, interviews that you're compiling down and boiling it down to commonality. Sure. What the common themes are. And I think it's a brilliant way of doing it. And I love what you just said about getting out of the office. I am guilty.
We all are. We all are at times.
And it's there's a safety within the walls of your office. I can get things done, but I'll tell you, I've learned to love getting out and doing things like my favorite time of the day is lunch duty. I love lunch duty.
Sure.
I get to talk to my I get to talk to my teachers. I get to talk to my students. I get to talk to all my staff members because they all, guess where they come? To eat, right?
Oh, yeah.
So great chance. Doing bus duty, making sure you're on bus duty every morning, taking those opportunities because the day goes on. You do have to write, discipline referrals. You do have to do paperwork. That happens, evaluations.
You got to be in your office some. There's things you got to keep up with. But here's the deal. Here's how you know if you're not out enough in your building. This is a test for me. If I walk into a random kindergarten class or first grade class, if the kids stop what they're doing and they turn around and they yell, "Mr. Wilds, Mr. Wilds," and the teacher's like, "Pay attention," then you know you're not in there enough. If they're if they're used to seeing you, to the point where they don't stop what they're doing, oh, it's just Mr. Wilds. I know why he's here. Then that tells you, hey, I'm getting in there enough. If it's a disruption, you're not in there enough.
Well, I'll plead guilty because, my kindergartners, that's why I wear dark pants most of the day because they'll wipe their nose on my pants, giving me hugs. I love my kindergartners.
And here's the thing, man. I'm not on a high horse here. We're all guilty of that.
Right.
I walked into a classroom yesterday and they stopped and I had to put my hand up on my lips and point back to the teacher.
Sure.
Just because I don't want to be a disruption. But I want to be in there enough to where I don't become a disruption. That's when I know that I'm in that classroom enough.
That's your end goal.
Yes.
That's your goal. And I love it. And in all honesty, just sitting here talking through, we haven't hit on this, you and I together.
Oh no, we talk about this stuff all the time. But these are first time some of these things are popping up here.
And I'm setting goals for myself here. This is my PD now, as much as it is anyone else's here. I mean, I'm kind of like re-strategizing what I should be doing.
I've got my notebook here. I'm taking notes too. I'm ready.
Well, there's record here too. I mean, we're live and in color. So now that you got your research, what do you do with it?
Prioritize the issues, or concerns that you identified from your temperature check. Discuss those issues and concerns with your leadership team. That's what I did next. I developed a core leadership team, from different parts of the building. Again, people that had some experience and knew that community, knew that school well. We've made some changes through the years on that team, but for the most part, the core is still with me there. And we just discuss those issues. We collaboratively start developing a plan to address these issues. And the big thing there, man, and we're getting ready to start a whole new topic here, but the big thing there is to keep it simple. We had 10 prioritized areas. Number one, you can't identify you can't address 10 things all at one time.
No.
If you try to come up with some big elaborate plan to address, 10, excuse me.
That's a little thunderstruck for everybody. Yeah. Hey, no copyright issues. I'm just saying that's pretty bad. I like it.
If you start trying to make a big elaborate plan to address 10 separate areas, it's hard to get buy-in. So our big deal was start developing a plan and keep it simple, because keeping it simple makes the plan easier to understand and to follow, and simplicity encourages buy-in.
I love it. I would add to that, when you say those 10 things that you wanted to address, I am a big believer. I used to think that multitasking was the greatest thing ever. What I found is in change, if you try to multitask, you're destined for failure.
Sure.
Inevitably, because you're taking your eye off the ultimate goal.
Right.
I like compartmentalizing what I want to change. You just can't say we want to do everything all at once. People don't have the endurance for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the thing is, and we didn't do them one at a time, but we found that we couldn't address more than 2 or 3 issues at a time.
Sure.
And if it was something major, like a bigger topic to address, there might be, a month or so that we just focus on that topic. But a lot of times we had 2 or 3 topics. We were addressing 2 or 3 topics at a time, but really never any more than that.
Right.
You don't want to spread too thin. You don't want to get so much going on that you're really not addressing the topic.
I get you.
Just talking about it's not addressing it.
No.
It's really got to become a focus, and you've got to make some changes, and implement strategies, and that takes time. That's the key thing. Anytime you're talking about culture and you're making changes to culture, as well as I do, this is not a 1 or 2 week rodeo.
Oh no, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, we are honestly, I come to this school in 2017. I did my initial temperature checks, in the fall of 2017. It's 2020, and we're still working on some of these things and working through these areas. Now, have we made a lot of changes? Sure. We've hit all 10 areas now. Are where we want to be on all 10 areas? No. But we're a lot better than we were. We're a lot further down that road, than we were, 3 years ago.
And that's the goal, though, is, listen, we're not going to be perfect tomorrow, but we can always be striving to get better. When I started with me, you talked about at my school, you talked about your leadership team. Because of some of the cultural things that had happened, because some of the changes that had happened, my staff they were change weary. They were exhausted by change. And I would have my leadership team meetings, and I would go home completely stressed out. Faculty meetings were a nightmare because the angst and the anxiety of the idea of more change was too much for anyone to bear, much less myself. So I just got rid of my leadership team. I said, we're done.
Right.
For like a year and a half, we didn't have a leadership team. And then I learned I had to build those relationships with those key people. I'll think of influencers within my building. That's a big thing of mine. And pulling those influencers in, learning about them, getting on the same page, and then I slowly started rebuilding that team. And now, I've been there for 6 years. I've got a team that I can trust.
Sure.
I've got people that will be honest with me. And I think that's why I'm starting to see, progress in the right direction. It's been a struggle.
by kind of wiping the slate clean, I guess you could say, and starting over and building those relationships and forming the team. Number one, you're forming your team.
Bingo.
And, you've been there, like you said, for 6 years. And I think, the reason they might have been more resistant to change is, okay, we got a new principal. How long is it going to be? In 2 or 3 years, we're going to get another one. And in 2 or 3 years, we're going to get another one. Well, now they see he's been here 6 years. There's some continuity there. So they've really bought in a little more to what you're doing at that school. They know you're there for the long haul. They've learned you. You learned them. They've earned your trust. You've earned their trust. And like you said, man, they're going to be honest with you. So it was probably good that you took that time to develop that core team, that's not just, okay, I want you, and you, and let's see how this rolls.
Right. Don't go with the guys with the highest test scores.
Right.
Because I hate to say it, sometimes the ones that have been the influencers in your building and the ones who may have the highest test scores may not be the ones that you need building that culture. They could be in all honesty, they could be the virus, I call it the staph infection.
Yeah.
They're the staph infection in your organism. So,
well, it's like you've talked about before, you got to be careful because when you're addressing culture and you're trying to implement some changes and you're trying to make changes for the better, you do have pitfalls.
Yeah.
And you do have to identify those pitfalls. Talk to us a little bit about that, Chris. That's something you and I have talked to, off camera and off the mic before.
Sure.
Why don't you talk a little bit about identifying potential pitfalls?
Well, I think one thing is it's all about quick thinking. And I'm a reactionary guy. I am not the best planner. Ask my wife; she'll tell you all about it. I mean, my date book and my Rolodex are terrible. But one thing that I love, I use the analogy like chess. You got to see the board. You got to know what your pieces are doing and know what can happen. And when it does happen, and I address this in one of my blogs, I call it getting sideways. People get sideways that quick.
Real quick. And things go, when they make that turn, you've got to adjust immediately. And I use, I'm big into exercise. I'm big into riding and running. I use the example like a bicycle. If you're wrecking a bicycle, you have a split second to make decisions based on muscle memory. Oh, yeah.
You've got to adjust. And leadership's the same way. When you see that going sideways, you have to be, one, smart enough to identify what the problem is. Number two, have the muscle memory and the expertise to adjust, and then you got to move.
Sure.
You don't have that long. And I think with culture and school culture especially, I use the analogy of, Rome wasn't built in a day, but it burned in a night. School culture is the same way. All it takes is long.
It's hard to build. There's a lot of time and effort into building it.
Sure.
But if you're not careful, something can come along and tear it down real quick.
Well, and you and I both have had situations that, we neither one could see coming.
Sure.
We had no idea what was going on. And, you wake up one Monday morning and you've got a major cultural problem on your hands.
Sure.
How do you address that moving forward? And it's, you've got minutes, if hours at best, to adjust to keep your school running. And, it's not going to run perfectly, but to at least be functional to get those kids, an education.
Yeah, brother. And here's the thing, man. That's a whole segment on its own. I'll be honest with you. When you talk about, you've got your culture and you've got so many things that can threaten that culture and you've worked so hard, you've done these temperature checks. I mean, number one, that's the importance of temperature checks.
Absolutely.
That way you do identify these pitfalls or these things when they're happening that could potentially tear your culture down. And number two, you gotta hit those things head on.
Oh, yeah.
There's no dancing around them. And it's tough and it's hard. And it gets back to that saying, well, that's why you get paid the big bucks, Well,
that's why you sit in the chair, right?
Yeah, but in a way, I don't know about the big bucks, but it is. I mean, that's why we're there. That's why we do what we do. You've got to hit those things head on. And like I said, man, that is a segment in itself.
Oh,
we could get off
absolutely.
onto that for 30 minutes.
Well, and I think maybe that's a future episode to discuss because we could talk about pitfalls and problems and storytell. I'm always good for a good story.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing when we're talking about culture, it's one of those things. I use another statement. I'm big on little analogies, euphemisms, if you will, with my staff. Perception becomes reality.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're talking about culture, how everyone, your temperature checks, how people perceive you is what the reality is in your school, whether it's true or not. A Facebook post by an angry parent is one of those things that will get you sideways that quick. An angry teacher who goes out and, does something or runs that mouth.
man, and it's crazy how contagious that stuff is.
Oh,
Contagious.
You know, I've had situations that complete falsehoods that were publicized on social media that came to me. I didn't even know it existed. I'm not a big social media guy, but it's like I've got a culture problem today.
Right.
But as you said, that's a segment for another day.
Sure.
So let me ask you a question. Let's kind of close this out. Tell me, one thing we want to do every week is we want to talk about some of the development we're doing personally. So Dennis, tell me a little bit about what you're reading this week. What's your main topic or main book?
Well, a book that I just recently finished. You know, I'm not currently reading it this week, but it's the latest book that I finished last week. Is The Coffee Bean by John Gordon and Damon West. This book's a little like me. It's simple and easy to read. You can sit down. You can read. You can read it in one sitting. You know, it doesn't take long to read through this book. It's an inspiring tale that follows a young man named Abe. He's filled with stress and fear as he faces challenges and pressure at school and at home. One day after class, you know, his teacher shares with him a life-changing lesson of the coffee bean. Abe discovers that instead of letting his environment change him for the worse, you know, he can transform the environment that he is in for the better. So Abe embarks on an inspirational journey to live his life like the coffee bean. And that's, you know, I've shared the story with my faculty and my staff since then, you know, and I've encouraged them and challenged them to be the coffee bean.
Yeah.
You know, like it. If you've not read it, it's a good read. Like I said, it's simple. It's an easy read. It's relatable to education, business, you know, any kind of organization, you know, that involves culture.
Right.
Because, you know, it just talks about how, you know, don't let the environment change you. You be the change agent in the environment.
Oh, I like that a lot. The change, and that kind of adds to what my book for the week is. This is the one I finished most recently. In fact, you've given me Relentless. I'm going to start that this week.
Yeah, great book.
Well, and unfortunately, I've got a stack that I'm weeding through right now.
Hamish Brewer's Relentless is a great book, and we'll talk about that another day. And I'll do another plug before you go in. A friend of mine that, you know, I've just recently met and befriended through social media. You know, and if you're not on Twitter, man, it's the greatest form of free professional development. And you can, and
we're on Twitter.
Yeah, we're on Twitter. Check us out. It'll be on the bottom.
Yeah.
You know, follow us and check us out. But Jonathan Alschmeyer is also a teacher that's got a book that just released called Next Level Teaching. I've not even got a chance to read it yet, but I know the school that he comes from. He comes from the same school that Hamish Brewer is a principal at. And, you know, I've talked with him. I know he was excited about this book to come out, and I look forward to getting it and reading it. It's going to be a great book. So I look forward to doing a post about it in the future too. So now tell us a little bit about what you're reading now.
Okay. Well, mine's, when you said change agent, I believe that change starts with the leader. Okay. So for me personally, I look for how I can change, how I can be the strongest leader I can be to lead that change, to be that change agent. And the one I'm reading right now is by David Goggins, or I just finished a book by David Goggins. He's on Instagram, he's on Twitter, but let me say, not safe for work. He's an ex-Marine, so he speaks like a Marine, very much like a Marine. So if you're listening with small children, listen with headphones. It's a good idea.
Thanks for the warning.
But it's You Can't Hurt Me.
Gotcha.
And he talks about personal transformations, how he was an overweight African-American man from a very racially divided part of the country. He decided one day he wanted to go into the Navy, and he was a Navy SEAL. He went through Hell Week 3 times, 3 times in a year. He held at one point the world record for pull-ups, and he is a large man. He is not a 100-pound person. He's like
he's not wiry.
No, he's not wiry. He is absolutely, he's a beast. I kind of picked up on him because he's an ultra runner too. He's run the Badwater 120, and it's the hardest race in the world. It's 110 degrees, and they run 120 miles over the course of 36 hours. And he placed 3rd.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a beast, and his Instagram post kind of got me involved, got me interested, and I started reading that book, and it is absolutely, you can't put it down because he writes as he speaks, so it's a little rough to read at times, but he talks It's raw, absolutely, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Not every professional book has to be written, in jargon.
Right.
But it was very how to go about those changes you need to make within to see the changes you want to see with outside of your world, and it is amazing. So I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
You Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins. So, brother, I tell you,
Hey, listen, man, I think we did a good job.
hey, not too bad.
First podcast, we knocked it out, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I want to thank everybody for coming in and listening what was coming from the principal's desk. I'm Sharp.
Wilds out.
Hey, buddy, stay sharp out there. Everyone have a great week.